Oh, come on. This sounds like it's just another
pointless story.
So there's this thing. It's called Slide the City. To the best of my understanding, they're a business or an organization or something. And they go around from big city to big city to big city. And they set up this huge, giant 1,000-foot slip and slide. And the whole idea of it is that they set it up in the middle of the road. Booths come out, food trucks come out, tons of people come out. And the whole thing is that you go to the top of the hill in the middle of this road in your city, and you slide down this giant slip and slide. And honestly, in theory, it sounds like the funnest thing ever. So a friend and I decided to get tickets, and we were gonna do Slide the City. And we were so pumped. She bought our tickets for us, and we went on Saturday. Now, like I said, in theory, it sounds like the funnest thing ever. In reality, it was probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had. With that big of an event, it's one of those things where it's astonishing to me how terrible it was. So this pointless story is all going to be about my horrible experience with Slide the City. My friend got our tickets for this past Saturday, and I found out from her that it's required to have a tube to go down the slide, which is fine. That's normal. That's one of those things you would expect, especially if it's a slip and slide on a city road that's probably full of rocks and stuff. I would assume that eventually you would get slip and slide burns or something if you didn't have a tube. It made sense. What bothered me was that they do not have rentable tubes. They offer tubes for purchase, but only if you get their most expensive slide package. Again, this is the best of my understanding. I might be wrong. So we had to spend the morning going to sporting goods store to buy tubes for the express purpose of going down this slip and slide, which was okay, but like way too much of an inconvenience for something like that. It bothered me that they didn't just have a trailer full of tubes that they offered for rental. That seems just like a cash cow. They already have tubes that have their branding on them, Slide the City. So why would they not have just a trailer full of tubes that they rent out for $2 a piece? Because the whole thing is that they want to make this as hard as possible. So, we have our tickets, and they are for the 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock block. Anywhere within that 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock block, we can go down the slide. So after we get our tubes, get them pumped up, we go down to the road where the event is taking place, and at first glance it looks great. There's like food trucks, there's a radio station there doing stuff, there's a bunch of tents that have merchandising and check-in and everything like that. So we pull in, it's a little after 9, and these two girls are walking towards us, and they're completely dry, they're holding all their Slide the City crap. And they're like, oh, don't bother rushing to get out of your car. We're like, oh, really? Why? The slide's not even set up yet. Really? Okay. I mean, I guess that's forgivable. It's a little after 9, but maybe it's just really close. No, it wasn't. At about 11 o'clock, we start getting really annoyed that the slide's not set up. So we go get some food out of the food truck, and we go to the check-in area, and we're like, hey, we've been here for 2 hours. The slide's not set up. Is this gonna happen? Is it gonna happen soon? What can you do for us to make this worth our time? And the poor girls working the booth, I'm sure, have had this all morning, because immediately they offer to upgrade our passes. We had purchased the 1 slide ticket, and they upgraded us to the 3 slide ticket. But because the slide wasn't set up, that was useless at the time. They say that we can have 1 free item of merchandise, and then they give us the package that has the tubes in it. And it's like, okay, thank you. The free tube that we had just gotten was useless because we had purchased tubes earlier for Slide the City. The free merchandise they gave us, I actually can't complain about because it's pretty cool. I got some really cool new sunglasses. They're green and blue. They have a cute little penguin on the side. My friend got a hat with a little penguin on it. But it still doesn't compensate for the time that I've wasted waiting for them and their professional business to set up the event that I was promised, that I paid for, that is expected of them as they are providing a service that I have paid for. I can't stress enough that I gave them my money. I gave them my money to slide down the slide at 9 o'clock. We ended up waiting from the time we got there to the time that we actually went down the stupid slide. We waited 4 hours. Remember how our time block was from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock? Even though we showed up at 9 o'clock, we didn't get to ride the slide until 1:30 because that's how long it took them to set it up. Now, this is particularly frustrating because they are supposed to be some kind of professional business. They do this all over the country. I have seen posts from Chicago, Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Los Angeles, all over the country. And most of the reviews on Facebook are like, oh, had a great time at Slide the City, oh, my son loved it, things like that. On Saturday, when it took them 4 hours to set it up, the Facebook posts were getting more and more negative and were disappearing faster and faster. They were filtering the negative Facebook posts, which is annoying in itself because they can't even handle the bad publicity that they brought upon themselves. By about 12:30, we were waiting in line with our tubes on us. We were towards the front of the line. Even at the top of the hill where we were waiting, there was a whole section of slide still not set up. The whole operation seemed to be 5 kids and a forklift. We're watching a bunch of guys that look like they're my age, trying to set up generators, trying to hook up the hoses, trying to get the slide all laid out. The whole time there's one kid barking orders. One kid that seems to know what he's doing. And it's like, well, no wonder this wasn't done in time. And it's like, okay, fine. Have a 5-person staff. I don't care. But if it's gonna take this long, be here at 4 in the morning so that it's set up by 8, and you can have test slides by 8:30 so that it can be open by 9 o'clock, which is what you promised me. 1 o'clock rolls around, and they finally have teenage boys with hoses kind of hosing down the middle. Now, I don't entirely understand the point of that exercise. On each section on the slide, there's like an arch. And on the arch, there's hoses that go up around it. And the hoses are supposed to spray water, which keeps the flow of water constant, keeps the slides wet, gets you wet when you go underneath it. Instead of hooking the hoses into the arches that have hoses in them, there's kids that are like spraying it down. It is 100-degree weather. We've been standing there for hours. So I yelled to the 2 kids and I'm like, hey, why don't you spray us? And they're like, oh, okay. So one of the boys yells, hey, who wants to get wet? Crowd screams, obviously, because it's super hot and that would be great. Kid rears back, puts his finger on the hose, and it's like, the water pressure wasn't even good enough to get it from the other side of the slide to the crowd to get us wet while we waited for this ridiculous slide to be ready. So we continue standing in line, not getting sprayed with a hose. There's waters for sale, but you have to pay for the waters. I'm pretty sure like 5 kids got heat stroke while we were just standing there. Finally, it's about 1:30. We hear cheering from the top of the slide. We look up, sure enough, people are starting to go down. We watch these first sliders start to go down, and it is just sad. They're hitting the slides, you know, jumping on their slides on their tubes, and sliding off their tubes, and just eating it, because the slides aren't wet enough to get the tube down. It is so dry that their tube will stick and they will fall off. They get probably 20 people on the slide at the same time, and they're all just stuck in a bunch because they don't have the water going correctly. I don't understand it. So we watch the first 20 go down in this catastrophe. They finally make it to the bottom and no more can go because they figured out like, oh, the slides have to be wet. So we wait a while longer. Finally, there's more cheers. People start going down again. And their solution to the slides not being wet enough is to just throw employees in the middle of every slide section, and the employees are supposed to push the kids down. And I think that's about as good of a solution as when Niantic took the steps out of Pokemon instead of just fixing it. Like, oh, here's the issue. Instead of fixing it, we'll just ignore it. It does not make sense to me. So they start rushing people down. There's like no space between sliders, which if you're in a group is fine, but they're just sending people together, one after the other, just shoveling them through. Trying to get it done as fast as they can, I imagine. And I'm sitting there watching people just run into strangers. They're hitting tubes, they're falling off, there's people losing shoes, hats, and these people are just shoving them down. Like, oh, my job is just to keep you going, that's it. It finally comes to be our turn, and like 3 people in front of us, they stop the line again. I don't even know why this time. Like, before I could tell they were doing stuff, trying to fix stuff. Now they've just shut down the line and it's like, they're just standing there. Everybody's just standing there. Maybe there was a crowd of people on the slides. I couldn't actually see that far down, but it's like, what? They've got a kid with a hose at the top of the slides who actually is spraying the crowd, but again, it's not hooked up to the slide to make the slides any wetter. Like, why are you wasting these hoses? So we wait another 10 minutes and we finally go down the slide. I have recorded my experience for your viewing pleasure. It's a little all over the place. The first little while was honestly fun. I could actually see how this could have been fun. It was just so poorly executed. But the idea is good. I get down the first part of the slide and I get to the second part of the slide. I'm going pretty fast, I'm having a great time. And then I get to the midsection that A, is not wet enough, and B, is all crumpled up. It's like it wasn't pulled tight when they first set it up. I get to the crumpled section and I wreck. I have to stand up, figure out where my shoe went, get back on my slide and try to keep going. But trying to keep going is impossible because there's no water to slide on. I'm standing in the middle of the tube line as people fly past me because there's no regulation as to who goes when. I finally get back on my tube and I start to fly again because I've made it to one of the wet sections. And I run over a little girl. You can hear her in my video. Daddy! So I run her over, and by then I'm almost to the bottom. So I just finish out the slide, make it to the bottom. I don't even make it to the bottom. I'm pretty sure that I had to stand up and walk the rest of the slide when I got to the last section because it wasn't on a steep enough hill to actually help me make it down. Like, these are all the problems. It wasn't steep enough, it wasn't wet enough, there were people in my way. It's just, there were so many issues. But I guess that's what they do, is just ignore problems with their company. Yeah, them's fighting words. But it was overall just a terrible experience. We went down once. Even with our upgraded bracelets, we only went down once because it was so bad we didn't want to slide again. And they were telling us like, oh, we're so sorry for the inconvenience. If you have fun and you've already slid 3 times, come back, we'll give you a new bracelet and you can slide 3 more times. And I'm like, who in their right mind would want to? Maybe if they had finally gotten it set up and the whole thing was wet and it was fast and it was fun, maybe. But it wasn't. So what kind of compensation is that? So we threw our tubes in the car, left, and went to the pool where it's actually wet and fun. Oh, it was so bad. So I would not recommend it to people. I wouldn't. Because my experience with this last one in Utah was so horrible. I hope people have fun with it. I didn't. It's just, it's not fun waiting in line for something for 4 hours for it to just disappoint you. It's like if Disneyland was terrible. It's a bad analogy because Disneyland can't be terrible. It's like if you went to a local carnival and you paid them $40 to go down one of those like rucksack slides where you get in the potato sack and you slide down the metal slide, but you had to wait 4 hours to get on the metal slide. And then when you finally do get on it, it's hot and so it burns you and your rucksack has holes in it and the slide isn't steep enough and so you just kind of have to wiggle your way down. And then when you get off and complain, they're like, oh, you can go again. That'll make up for it, right? No. So that's what I got. And until next time, stay sweet. This is like the most complainy video I've ever done. I'm just really mad.